In the first information ecosystem lecture, I talked about the information imperative, the need that living organisms have to gather information from their environment to utilize in adaptive responses to that environment. And I suggested that this ability to gather information, in fact, helps in survival and particularly in thriving. And I went on to further suggest that one of the factors in the success of human beings as a life form is their unprecedented and unequal ability to develop and utilize complex, informationally rich ecosystems. And in particular, within the last approximately 70,000 years, this has really been a factor. So human beings and proto-human beings have been on the brink of extinction 3 times in the last 1.2 million years. And in fact, within the period that we associate with anatomically modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, anatomically modern human beings have been on the brink of extinction twice. Once about 150,000 years ago, and again about 70,000 years ago after the Toba supereruption. And it's estimated by researchers that after that Toba supereruption, the human population on the planet dwindled to somewhere between like 1,000 and 10,000 individuals globally. So human beings were really on the ropes. They were on the brink of extinction 70,000 years ago. Of course, now human beings have over 7.7 billion individuals globally. So that rebound, that thriving that has occurred in the last 70,000 years is really kind of astonishing when you think about it. And I would suggest to you that one of the factors that is a key factor in that turnaround, that burst of thriving that we see starting around 50,000 years ago, is that anatomically modern human beings begin to develop more and more complex and informationally rich information ecosystems that had the sorts of properties that we talked about in the last lecture. At this point in human history, we have an unprecedented situation. Human beings can sit in their homes, at their offices, they can sit out on the street with their cell phone. They can access just a mind-boggling array of topics, gather information about a wide variety of things. They can do so in an instant, in just seconds, and they can gather that information from individuals, institutions, and so on, globally, anywhere around the world. And this has never existed in human history or the history of the planet before. There's never been such a complex and informationally rich, widely accessible information ecosystem before. So it is a tremendous success story, really. But ironically, and what will be the focus of this particular lecture, is that that success has actually generated 2 of its own problems. The first problem that we want to look at is that information ecosystems now contain too much information for them to be useful just in and of themselves. Now, I refer to this as information superabundance in the lecture and the chapters, and I'll define information superabundance in the next slide. But for now, I'll just tell you that ecosystems reach a tipping point of information superabundance when they start to have so much information that finding information within an information ecosystem is as cognitively challenging as finding information in the distal environment. Now, information superabundance isn't a phenomenon that's never occurred before. I'd suggest to you that the development of the human visual system had to deal with a point of information superabundance. Our eyes have over 120 million photosensitive cells in the back of each one, and they pool that information to make inferences about the distal environment in depth. But that information is just so massive in its sheer content and complexity that the human visual system, as evolved as it is, as large as it is, it can't possibly process all that information. And so part of the human visual system involves the development and utilization of some information management tools, one of them being visual attention. And so we'll look at human vision and visual attention, and what we'll see is that the reason why we're able to access the sorts of information that we want in the way that we want is that we don't try and process all that information all at once. Instead, we have this tool that directs us to what our brain thinks is important for us to see. And we'll also see that when that tool's assumptions are in line with the task and the environment, that it works fantastic. But if those assumptions get violated, that we find that human beings' vision lets them down. It doesn't work as intended. Similarly, the internet has developed a set of information management tools, and we're going to look at two of them. We're going to look at search engines, and we're going to look at social media news feeds. And we're going to sort of pull back the covers on them and look at their underlying assumptions to get a sense of how they find information for us, to see what their strengths are and correspondingly what their weaknesses are. And my goal is to help you see that even though you have these incredibly powerful tools, that the personal development and curation of your information ecosystem is still necessary. The second problem that emerges is a problem that emerges in nature whenever an organism develops a very successful strategy. Success breeds exploitation and counter strategy. And so what we'll see is that in information ecosystems, there are exploitive and counter strategies that are operant all the time. And we'll, in this lecture, look at a series of 5 that fall under the rubric, almost meaningless name, of fake news that we see batted about now. And I'll tell you why and how I differentiate them and why I think that they have potentially dangerous consequences, why they might be exploitive in nature, or simply they pose risks to our understanding of the world.